So Rob, I'll have you kick things off. Have fun.
So I'm going to throw something over to Ryan Chapman just because he's on here and just because he's like such an amazing guy. So Ryan, in your vast experience with the ransomware, a lot of hospitals are constantly worried about ransomware and so forth. And I think I've asked you this before. It's on our one of our sessions, and it's always a fascinating debate when it comes down to do you pay the ransom, not pay the ransom, and I always like to hear like a definitive yes or no. And I'll go around to all of our panelists on this question too. The pay it or don't pay it, and why?
I knew you were gonna. As soon as you said it's up for debate, I was like, "Oh,
yeah."
Say. Well, I have a personal opinion, so this is not a where are we? A SANS opinion officially, right? Nor is it a BlackBerry. This is a Ryan position. Never, ever pay it. In a perfect world, never pay it. Why? Because it'll go away. I mean, it's only here because people pay it, right? If people will never ever pay the ransom, then it will just go away. Well, they'll just turn to something else to make money. But that's not really theoretical though. And the reason it's not theoretical is because many organizations may just completely vaporize if they don't pay the ransom, right? Or they'll feel as if they'll vaporize. The big thing that I try to get across to people is that there's this stigma that if you pay the money, you're going to be able to recover and that you're going to recover quickly. And that is that is not guaranteed at all. So you may pay money to have your data not released, right? And then the data may be sold anyway. So I guess I should pause for a second and talk about the multi-levels of extortion. The primary extortion being that your devices and your data are locked down and you can't use them, right? Or you can't retrieve your data back. The other one these days being the second level of extortion is your data. Many times they will access and then exfiltrate or steal your network data, or not your network data, all your data. And when doing that, there's the idea that if you pay, that data will then be secure. It will be deleted or removed or whatever. You have zero guarantee that that's actually going to happen. And we have definitive proof, empirical evidence that many times organizations have paid the ransom. Like here's the Bitcoin, and then yet their data was still sold or auctioned on the dark web, on the dark net. Revil was really big on that. Revil is one of the ransomware groups that was around and a big name for a while, and they were caught doing that multiple times. So did Conti. They were known to do that. Probably a number of other ones I'm just forgetting to mention right now. When it comes down to the question, I believe it should be a utilitarian decision. If you are a healthcare organization, right? What are you specifically? Oh, we're a hospital. Okay. Like, what size hospital? What wings are involved? It hit the NICU and this and that. And I'm like, oh, that's not good. And so for me, it really comes down to what's the better choice for the most amount of people. The money that we pay those ransoms, it goes into funding a lot of things that many people may not really realize. And that money gets funneled through a lot of organizations that do really bad, horrible things, not just extorting people and shutting down networks. So, I'll digress there and let other folks chime in. My big thing is if you can get away with not paying it, don't. And if you do pay it, just know that just like in the Colonial Pipeline attack, when they paid the ransom and they received the decryptor, it was ridiculously slow. It was so slow, in fact, that they had to build their own decryptor and use the private key that they actually bought. You're paying for the key for the most part. And a lot of systems will be basically ruined anyway. I'll go with ruined, if you will. So, yeah, what do you other folks think?
I'm going to agree with you for the most part. I think, even if you take the data release out of the mix, numbers I've seen are your costs are comparable whether you pay or not. And that's not including paying, right? So your cost to recover from backup in time and people, money is roughly equivalent to the time it's going to take you and the money it's going to take you to do the decryption. That's separate from paying. And like you said, Ryan, the data's out there. It's gone. There's no guarantees. So if it's going to take you the same amount of time, same cost, why would you pay? Having said that, it is always a business decision. We can just sit here and tilt at windmills and tell people they shouldn't be paying, but it's always a business decision. We've worked with an airline. Their number is, I think, $20 million an hour that they're down. With that math, it has to be a pretty big ransom for them not to pay, right?
Yeah, I think the perspective that I'll bring to this is pay or not pay is immaterial to having a plan. Making a decision before it happens, I think, is absolutely key. So right now I am working on some of our incident response, and part of that is working with my legal counsel, writing down, do you know, everybody in this audience, type of 1, if you know the email and phone number of your local FBI agent. Do you know that? Write down right now, put a 2 if you know the phone number of your cyber insurance specific to ransomware. Do you know if your ransomware is covered in cyber insurance or K&R? You need to know these things before it happens and make an organizational decision. We recently, so we at Echo, we were about to hire a 3PL, so a third-party logistics company. 2 weeks before we were going to transfer over to them, and I'll leave them nameless, they were down for 7 weeks. Now, they didn't say if it was ransomware or not. It was ransomware. 7 weeks they were down, so which tells me they didn't have a plan. Now, interestingly, is it eRisk Hub or somebody put out a great white paper that said organizations after ransomware or after, like, take Uber, oh, they're going to put all this money in, they're going to do all this work, and they're going to increase in their maturity, right? Well, the data shows that an organization pre-ransomware and an organization 6 months after ransomware are equal in maturity, because Rob mentioned it earlier. Culture is what keeps you, but culture is what makes you mature. And so I don't care if you pay or not. I'm just saying, don't make that decision when the house is on fire. It's not going to work, right? So have a plan before you're above the fold, before you're in the news. And that's the only advice that I could give you.
And I'd just add, make sure that your FBI, local FBI agent knows who you are when you call them.
Do you know that you can have your FBI agent attend your tabletops? Do you know that CISA will run a tabletop for you? There's a lot of resources out there. My insurance broker, we just signed our new cyber insurance policy. By the way, my background is actually in cyber insurance, working in Lloyd's of London for the energy sector. So I have a deep background in cyber insurance, different thing. But my new broker, we just switched, they give us resources for maturity, for insurance. They don't want to pay, so they train you. These are resources that are free. And who's taking advantage of them? And do you know, Stephen, do you know the name of write it down. And by the way, don't have your incident response plan offline, please, print it out. Like, that should be your doorstop, because if you're ransomware, you're not going to get it, right? Too late. So
I want to jump in here and say I run some of those tabletops. At BlackBerry, we have a strategic services group. That's one of their primary gig. But whenever someone wants a very detailed, lower level, hands-on style, even maybe sometimes implanting data into their network to go find or whatever, they throw me in there because why not? And every single time I've always asked, who's your local field office agent? How many times have you communicated with them? How many in-person meetings have you had with them? Can we have them here? Many times they're like, what are you talking? The FBI? Why would we ever? And it's just, it honestly seems like healthcare hospital organizations have been some of the ones where the FBI folks have been there, and it's awesome. I love it. And many times I'll stop running my mouth, surprising, right? And I'll look over and just be like, they'll start communicating with, and they'll start, running how they would liaise. And I'm like, go. You keep going. Like, keep going. It's so important.
Question for you guys. The IR plan. I've sometimes had customers do this and told them to do this, which is get a completely, and the trick here is completely independent tenant in your favorite cloud service, and use that for the collaboration during IR as well as the IR plan. You guys agree with that approach as long as it's completely separate?
How much do you trust your DevSecOps guy? You know, yeah, I think if you can simulate in real time, sure, absolutely. I know from a maturity perspective, that would be well above and beyond, you know, our capability. But I mean, I think that the intent is good there.
Are you referencing during the tabletop, or are you referencing during an actual IR as in abstracting all your things over there?
Like during an IR, have an Office 365 tenant that's standalone that you can use to collaborate, store docs, all of that stuff.
I like having that anyway. I am a huge proponent of having all of your security tools abstracted as far away from the general environment as possible.
Yeah.
So whatever you're using for, you know, as a SIM, if you're SIM, I mean, sure, you have to send logs to it, right? But even still, whatever you're using for your communications and ticketing, you know, if it's an open source one like RTIR or something like that, or if it's you're using something more like SOAR based, a swim laning kind of something or other, or Palos, whatever it is, like have it way over there, because the last thing you want during an incident is for the threat actors to be like, hey, look what I found. That's all bad. So yeah, I like that idea. We actually, well, I guess it's a little bit different for a consulting group because that's what we do every case. I mean, technically, we actually have a multitude of tenants themselves, not just like EC2 instances or whatnot that we spin up, you know, per case, but we literally be like, that one exists just for that data, you know, and then it doesn't exist anymore. It's gone, that type of thing. Of course, you save all the data. I love it. But again, I saw why Jason was hesitant to be like, because it's quite, if you have a team that can do that, then you're already on the right path. You know, they're going to be using some type of automated, they're going to be using Terraform with Salt and all kinds of fun stuff to like spin up this awesome, cool stuff. A lot of folks probably aren't going to be that mature though.
You know, so let's talk about Terraform. So we just did infrastructure as code. It was a major initiative that took us a year long, but Terraform, like click a button and you're re-imaged and you're up. Now we haven't stress tested that in the tabletop. We just finished it, but yeah, look at infrastructure as code. You don't want to be in AWS clicking the toggles, you know, you don't have to do that. And by the way, human error, you're going to get that wrong. I self-promotion here, but I'm writing a book, and the idea is we've all heard of tech debt. We all know that concept, right? What about the concept of risk debt? All those decisions that you're making, all the toggles that you're missing, all of the little bits, that is an accumulation of risk debt until you get to an entropic state, and then you're frozen, right? So you have to look at the human side, not of tech debt, right? But of the risk debt that the decisions that you're making, the toggles that you're missing, the misconfiguration, all of those things, that using different JavaScript libraries, using all of that stuff will at some point make you so you can't mature. You have to go backwards before you can go forwards. So risk debt is a very real concept that we should all be thinking about above and beyond, should we develop this new piece of software, right? And so
I think that human error plays such a huge role in any type of response, especially with ransomware. Goodness, but just like you said, I want to go back to your statement regarding being pre-planning. Just the potential for you to pay, that needs to have discussed way in advance. And the accounts that you would need to even have should be set up way in advance. I'm not advocating directly for filling them with money, right? Fill in the coffers, if you will, but have those accounts, and your cyber insurance should, of course, be involved in that. For me, I went out and bought some crypto coin. I missed the whole craze on purpose. I was like, nah, it's all stupid. Oops. Apparently Bitcoin was worth a little bit of money, whatever. But I went out and I bought the dumb one, Dogecoin. You remember that little, yeah. I went out and I was like, I'll put $500 into it. It's mostly gone now, whatever. But I figured Elon Musk, come on. I thought he was going to make me rich.
So,
it took me 4.5 days. 4.5 days to set up an account to just be able to buy $500 of crypto, right? What? I went through multiple exchanges. It was a huge headache. I had to have all kinds. I mean, they might as well just send them a vial of my blood.
Mhm.
And so yeah, it's not just a drop of a hat. Oh, cool. We'll buy this with crypto and then we'll go ahead and pay it. Ooh, no, you have to have all that pre-planned.
So, one thing that, and again, going back to insurance, if your insurance policy is not built in to your incident response, how many people have read the it's over there, the very thick O&M? Now your policy is like 2 pages long, right? It's like how much you get and all that. But the big book, the one that's 200 pages or whatever it is, who's read that? Who's incorporated that into their incident response? Do you know, answer your question right now, do you know the stack order of who to contact before you pay something? What forensics firm? Can you use your own forensics firm, or do you have to use a forensics firm that is guided by your broker? And if you don't use theirs, or if you pay before you contact them, incident response, ransomware, whatever, your policy, bye, it's null and void. You have to follow the procedures, speaking of policy, right, to Rob's point. But that's a fat policy that you have to read, and you have to get in, you have to incorporate that. Because if you don't know the triggers, if you don't know the contact information, if you don't know who to, like what you can do and when, your policy, your cyber insurance, your main form, your only form of transferring risk, it's gone.
And don't forget the lawyers in that conversation. I've had this is not legal advice. Your lawyer will give you legal advice. But there are many who advocate very, very strongly against paying for legal reasons. Forget everything else. So they've also got to be in that communication.
Yeah, that's a good point. You need to have that on, whether it's retainer or just have the phone number of the firm to call. It's critically important.
So I'm an IR guy. That's what I do. I'm right. I cannot count, sadly, very sadly, how many clients I've lost, right? Because the client, and we ask them, did you contact your site? Oh yeah. Or they'll just be like, yeah, we'll do it. And I'm like, well, maybe like do it now, like hang up with me now and go call. I've lost clients, and sometimes we've been like a week into the freaking case and they're like, oh, we've been told you literally have to get out completely now. I'm like, wonderful. Now for me, sure, we lost the work, but for the client, oh man, if you want to feel a real setback, get hit with ransomware, spend a week letting a crew like mine come in and collect all your data, parse it, ingest it, become familiar with it, start helping you out, form an action plan. And then all of a sudden, oh, never mind. We're going to do the whole thing over with someone else. Oh, yeah.
A firm that you have no relationship with because you didn't build a relationship before. I know my insurance broker's name. I have her phone number in my phone. And I've just had meet and greets with her, hey, let's just get on the phone and chat. She knows my name. I can't tell you how important that is.
All right. Well, I have a question for you guys. Like one of the things that's come up, especially recently in the talking to a lot of folks outside of SANS, is over COVID, a lot of folks have been starting to transfer a lot of their on-prem to off-prem. What are you guys seeing in a lot of organizations? Like how much of this is actually going on from a defense mechanism, like from what they're actually defending is, what is the actual mix, from, what organization is defending on-prem versus off-prem? Is it more off-prem? Is it on-prem? What is the mix? Is healthcare going to be one of those unique industries that is going to be, always have on-prem that they're going to have to worry about? Are a lot of organizations going to be, most of their critical assets going to be off-prem in the cloud? How's that going to change the face of security? I mean, just like, kind of an open discussion here about it.
I'll start with, I think there's a lot of going on with data being in other locations. I think many of the organizations I'm working with still have that on-prem mentality. Sure, you've got an EDR or something on your endpoints, but in terms of knowing where data is, controlling it, managing it, I think there's an awful lot of blind spots, and we're still running the organizations like everyone's still in the office, which they aren't.
Yes, clients coming in for us, we see quite a bit of organizations who are pushing towards the cloud, and what we're seeing is that they're doing so immaturely, I guess might be a word there. They don't really know what they're doing, essentially, is they're being sold on these ideas and concepts of, hey, you can have this platform and this platform, and then you can go do cool stuff. What they're not doing is they're not recognizing the new security ramifications associated with that. And for digital forensics, it's all about visibility. All about visibility. For me, in terms of forensics, it's visibility number one, and then time. Having a proper timestamp is simple as that. When did something actually occur? That's so important. We see them going serverless a lot these days. And when you go serverless, right, you have your applications in, whether it's Firebase, whatever it may be that you have, we're seeing that they're not thinking at all about logging or maintain those logs. If you're in GCP, for example, you have to create what's called a sink in order to take your logs and push them over into the sink. Otherwise, guess what? They go into the ether. And then you pull a group like us in and you're like, hey, all these crazy things happen. Can you tell me what happened? And we look in the tenant and we go, no, like not really. No, not at all. Do we even have, virtual VPC flow logs like in AWS? Do we have any kind of firewall where how do you route the traffic? Like, what do you mean route the traffic? It's on Amazon. Like, oh, yeah, there's a lot to it. And I find that unfortunately they're just kind of making the jump to it without truly understanding what they're getting into. And it's very unfortunate.
Yeah, I think combining Ryan's point with Rob's thesis of his talk is workforce planning. You can't take, a heavy iron dude and then just say, by the way, you're now a cloud dude or a cloud person. That's a different skill set, right? VPC flow logs. Okay, cool. But what about your application logs? Do you have Nginx? Like, are you able to correlate? Are they going in? We use an MDR. Are they going into the MDR? Do you know how to look at them in the MDR? And that's just monitoring. That's not even alerting, much less setting up. Like I said, Terraform. So I can speak to the energy sector. So one of my main clients for a long time, hopefully they don't mind me saying this, is Southern Company, one of the largest energy companies in the United States. And we were creating a plan for them to transition to a cloud-based environment. And if you think that, the energy sector and, gas and electric to grandma is complicated, what about, health of grandma in the hospital and transitioning them to the cloud? The care that we took, that was a 5+ year plan to transition substation stuff into the cloud, much less a healthcare network. And so that is a slow, meticulous, I call it landing a monolith. It's heavy. And once it's down, it ain't moving. So you've got to do it right. And it's got to have the skill set and you have to have a plan. And that strategy, by the way, can take 6-8 months to a year just in consulting fees, much less internal planning and budgeting. That's a brand new 5-year plan.
That's also one of the reasons why, if you think about it, like, the top 3 providers, AWS, GCP, and Azure, are looking at providing those services. I mean, Mandiant's getting acquired by Google. I mean, it's like, hey, you don't need to hire these people. We'll provide your incident response services for you. It's almost kind of brilliant. A lot of the startups that you're seeing now that, I'm talking to friends who are, in stealth mode, they're looking at sidecar applications to the Google, things in Google Cloud, Azure, and saying, hey, if, we're not going to be sticking inside the actual, servers themselves. We're going to sidecar app on top of it to do the monitoring that we're trying to do. But they're getting out of services altogether because they said, the services are going to be, trying to be, clobbered up and gobbled up by the top 3. It's kind of interesting. That's what I'm trying to look at the implications long term is like, if you're a company out there says, well, like Exchange is now on-prem or off-prem now trying to be handled by Microsoft. They said, we'll also handle your incident response. And that's where I'm like, well, wait a minute. That's interesting because before they just saw the stuff fly by and they would just stare at it. Now they would say, well, we could do something about that now. That's an interesting change in philosophy from a service provider perspective. It's like we could manage your assets. We could also manage your service. And it's, that hasn't fully come into fruition yet, but from a, what is going on there. And GCP is sitting there saying, hey, we're the third provider, but we could provide better services than the other two. So this is why they're, why they're trying to make some of these plays. It's an interesting debate that you're starting to get into from the security space. Like, what is it really going to look like in the next 5 years?
You folks remember when Zscaler was the big boy in town doing the cloud-based security, right? The security stack, I call it the security stack in the sky. And if folks aren't familiar, the idea there being, as opposed to using your on-premises security appliances, even with a firewall and things of that nature, the Zscaler service, your users would have an agent on their machines, and it would redirect all of their traffic essentially out of whatever point of presence they had to the Zscaler system. And then from there, they would have their own firewalls implemented. They would have their own yada yadas implemented. That model, and that was just the first company that really started pushing it hard, at least that I saw. That model is just, it was so enticing to the big three. They're like, oh, well, we'll just do that, right? They're already coming to us. And I also want to go back to Jason's comment about pushing the devices and not having your general policies implemented on them, as simple as having like your agents on them, as simple as having like a whatever policy you have. If you spin up a device of X, Y, or Z nature, it needs the following, as in like antivirus, right? The organization's antivirus, the organization's EDR agent. I've worked with clients who are like, oh yeah, we got hit in our whatever, right? Amazon, whatever it might be. And it turns out, we don't have, one of them was our client, right? Our customer for BlackBerry, right? They had our stuff and we were like, ooh, you got hit with that and you have our stuff? Like, that's a bad look for us. And they were like, well, actually, we had 40 servers in the cloud. None of them had anything enabled. I'm like, why? Like, well, people just spun them up. It's the Wild West. That's what the client told me. It's the Wild West. I'm like, no, it should not be.
I just want to quickly circle back to Rob's original question too on and I'm paraphrasing, but is healthcare going to stay on-prem? And I'll just say I had an ultrasound a few weeks ago. There are at least three doctors who have seen that ultrasound, each in their own practice, right? Specialist, family doctor, yada, yada, yada. None of them are connected, on a connected managed network, right? They all have their own office. They all have their own network managed by their own people doing who knows what. So I think in a hospital setting, I can see the on-prem argument, but healthcare as a whole, that it's all over the place. And I don't think anyone has a good grasp on that.
One of the comments that was floating by in I think it was Arena's talk, a lot of people were mentioning the BIA, the business impact analysis. 2 months ago, maybe, Atlassian went down and Atlassian lost a lot of data, right? Which led my CTO to ask me, what happens if Atlassian goes down for us? So I was like, I don't know. So I started asking around, what happens if Atlassian goes down? Well, that's Confluence and that's Jira. Well, this group could last 4 days and then they could muddle through. But our development team, and we're a startup, right? So we're a C-series startup. So that time matters to us and that above the fold matters to us. So if we're not continuously developing, so our developers, they could go 48 hours without looking at tickets because everything is run through Jira. Now, what about our Salesforce folks? What about our Shopify folks, right? We sell hundreds of thousands of devices through Shopify. What happens if that goes down? And so asking the questions not about your production environment in the healthcare space, the hospital network, but what about that other ring that enables that production environment to live and breathe? And those are interesting conversations because we're so focused on, keeping the lights on and the energy going to the defibrillator, and please do that. But you have to think about the secondary systems that enable that to pun intended, live and breathe around that network and that support network. So we can't just focus on this. We have to focus on that enabling layer, that corporate layer, or if we go Purdue model, right? Well, it's different a little bit, but it can live in a different zone or, I'll avoid the architecture talk, but, understand that and understand how that works and where that works and how it commingles.
I don't remember the last time I had to take anything from one doctor to the other, from a specialist. Like I can't remember. I honestly cannot. And it just hit me right now. I'm like, wait a minute. They always, so whatever random, I show up and I'm like, hey, so here's what's going on. They're like, oh, we know. Like, oh, okay. So abstracting that concept and taking it into the hospital, when you have, like, for example, you're moved from the ER to the triage room, you're moved over here, then you're moved to this department, and you're moved to that department, those types of things. Yeah, you're all on premises, right? But I'm also seeing a lot more specialty centers really that are trying to ensure that they are more secure in what they're doing. Like, there's a group called One Medical, if folks are familiar with them, and they specialize in on-premises care. So they'll go into groups like larger folks who want to do this, right? Who literally set up a doctor's office, if you will, on the campus, Google, Facebook, those kinds of groups. And when these groups come in, everything they do is remote, and all of their tools live in the cloud, right? And it just gets you to think, it's so tempting. Like, yeah, of course we want that. We want everything to be easily moved and transferred. I want my prescriptions like this, and I don't want, but there's just so much that goes into it that if any of those entities, get hit with ransom or just experience any type of loss because of one of the organizations going down, especially EMRs, that just scares me, because I've seen them go down, and I've seen them be attacked, and I've seen them with vulnerabilities. And when your medical records all of a sudden, it's all bad. It worries me. I love the idea, but it worries me.
Right. Next question then. I'm gonna go throw it to you. So I've been picking on Ryan all along here. All right. Steven. So, like I did the cloud, going on-prem, off-prem. One of the things that, we're always looking at, especially with the mobile devices and in conjunction with, with what we're seeing in a lot of our organizations, how concerning is it, maybe from your perspective, from, the wireless side of our networks, and, how to secure that, the bleed out from the networks. A lot of folks that are out there are always concerned about, like, what could be accessible from, the bleed out over, from the building, and, a lot of, I guess from a lot of questions I always get is securing that is, what is the threat? How much is FUD? Is that an actual concern? Or is, from, how do you potentially tap that down? Because, with a lot of hospitals walking around, you almost need the wireless effect. Not everyone's obviously connected in, almost every doctor is walking around with a pad, a data source, a, phone of some sort that is, collecting the data, the scripts and so forth. Like, wireless technologies are infused in here. So, how do you explain from a lot of healthcare organizations, from the wireless technology side, Bluetooth, and, from a security standpoint, the FUD versus reality?
That's a good question. So one place I'd start is there are wireless medical devices, absolutely, but there's a huge number of wireless devices in hospitals, especially in healthcare settings, that are what I would call traditional user devices: iPads, iPhones, computers, what have you, laptops. The good news there is we have some pretty common, simple, basic standards, and hopefully we are generally doing security pretty well with those. Like, I contrast that with a factory environment, or an industrial environment where you've got wireless from 20 years ago trying to talk to a different wireless vendor from 20 years ago. And there's no way you're doing any encryption, and you've got a wide area link. You're just trying to get across, a 70-mile shot and so on. So I think one of the advantages we do have is a lot of those are consumer devices. And those, we have Wi-Fi 3. I mean, sure, there's issues, but the overall risk is fairly low. On the individual devices like wireless infusion pumps and so on, a lot of that depends on the age. Right? If anything was deployed more than a couple of years ago, regardless of what feature set it had, I'm not confident that feature set is enabled and working now. If we're going greenfield, I think we're in pretty good shape, but I know we're not. And that worries me, but there's a couple of sadly mitigating factors there. One is that generally you are dealing with one users or one pump's data or something along those lines. Now, sure, can you kill a user? Or a patient? Possibly. But in terms of an organization-wide incident, I think your risks are a little bit lower, or at least comparable to someone just walking in the door and plugging something into the wall, right? So I guess I'm kind of torn there. I think we're not in great shape. We're in decent shape. And are there, is this one of the areas where we do the best we can, but also recognize that there are some much bigger fish to fry?
Yeah.
When was the last time that you looked yourself up? By yourself, I mean your organization up on Shodan. Ryan mentioned it earlier. Seriously, years ago, I was doing a consulting gig for, again, an energy company, and we did that. And guess what we found? And guess what was top of our report? When was the last time you looked at Shodan? And then there's another situation. It was a medical implant company, and it was doing an insurance evaluation for them. And we talked about this, that, and the other, and what are the risks and what are the loss scenarios? Have you drafted loss scenarios for yourself? And then what would the loss scenario cost? And the CIO didn't like us being there, and he was blah, 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 and he left. And we started talking about the one server Ryan mentioned earlier, this server in a closet. There was a server in a closet for this implant company that ran surgeries. And the single server was in a closet. And we did a risk analysis of it. We put this big number on the board. And by the way, there's 30 people from the company in that room. We put this big number on the board. And that's the number that if we're down, then this and then that. And we tallied it up. CIO walked in the room and his mood changed. He said, "What's that number on that board?" And his people said, "Well, if that server goes down, that's the number that we have to pay." And he sat down for the next 2 days because he said to the room, if that number is even remotely accurate, we cannot shrink fast enough to absorb that number. And so if we want to just talk about cybersecurity or cyber risk, we have to talk about money. People say who the CISO should report to. It's a great conversation. There's only one answer. Well, there's two answers. One, the board, but the only person they should be reporting to is the CFO. Period, full stop. Period, full stop. Because cybersecurity, cyber risk is the potentiality of loss. Without the potential of loss, there is no risk, and cyber risk has to come down to money at the end of the day, whether it's ransomware or that server going down or whatever. So cyber risk is dollars and cents. And as I think Arena talked about it earlier, if you can communicate in that term, then we can successfully conversate to the board, to our bosses, to our bosses' bosses, because that's how they see the world. And by the way, how they should see the world. I say the technology should come, up into the business, and the business should come down to the technology. You should have one person here and one person here, and they should be able to have a conversation and know what each other are talking about.
Yeah, I like it. All right, I have the elephant in the room question. This could be a hard question for everyone. And again, we're going to do the whoever could touch their nose, hand to their nose quickest is going to be last to answer. So we're going to see how well we do here. And you can't you have to let me finish the question before you can touch your nose. So there's a lot of when we talk about a lot of different industries out there, we almost treat cybersecurity like almost every industry has its unique issues, from energy to finance to military, DoD, government, and so forth. How unique really is healthcare when it comes to cybersecurity? Is it really that different, or what are the unique challenges in healthcare that no one else faces? Go.
All right, I'll jump in from a technology perspective. I don't think it's that unique. Everyone's got old stuff. Everyone's got, rickety stuff, important stuff, diverse networks. From a technology perspective, I think you could draw parallels across all kinds of different industries and come up with the same sorts of challenges. Now, from a risk impact, criticality of the business perspective, I think, we're at the top of the scale there with healthcare. That's people's lives.
Yeah, I tend to agree. But again, has it happened? I mean, that's kind of the thing. It's like, and you always go down into the FUD of this all. Like we get like, we've hurricanes hit, and that's where like a hurricane is, hospitals, and there's this documentary about like what happened down in Katrina. That's actual like documented. What happened, but like the cyber impact. Like documentation. I'm not saying, like there's not a scare factor here, but, we get into that a little bit. Some of the scares, and the uncertainties more than the actualities that occur here. But, definitely the impact of some of the stuff occurring really does get the pucker factor raised a lot, so that does increase the concern. So there's energy, but compared to finance, well, you could probably go a day or two without having to pull money out of the bank, but for how long? Before you have to buy gas or something else occurs. But what else? Anyone else have a thought on this? From the elephant in the room question.
Yeah. So when I left MITRE, and I worked in the developing prototypes for the DoD and the IC for 9 years or so, and that was a unique environment. I'm a former Marine, and that was a unique environment. But as a consultant, I heard something. Every single client said this to me. Well, we're a little special in how we do that. Well, we're kind of unique in that. And if everybody says that, that means that nobody is unique. And I think that there is a special danger in thinking that whether you or your sector is a special snowflake. Because if your sector is a special snowflake, now each of the critical infrastructure, the 16 critical infrastructures, have their own uniqueness, to their risks and their threats. But how you protect at the end of the day, how you protect a perimeter, how you protect IoT, how you protect your laptops and your endpoints, that basic stuff doesn't change. Yeah, the FDA's got regulation or, has got guidance and this and that. But if we begin to think and accept that we are special snowflakes, we are going to look for special solutions. And it's the similar thing to, well, we rolled our own encryption, right? Well, that's dumb. I knew an energy company that managed their own pay card, their own credit card billing. That's dumb. So the danger, the elephant in the room is, regardless of who we are and whatever critical infrastructure we exist in, if we think of ourselves as a special snowflake, then we're going to look for special solutions, and we're not going to follow the proven path of that encryption works. Why roll your own? Why do something special on your perimeter? It's a perimeter. So I think that's the elephant that I think at the end of the day, yeah, we've all got threats and risks, right? But the way that we architect is largely the same across any sector.
Do you think a lot of vendors don't follow that advice?
I think a lot of vendors try to say that they are unique and special, that they have a, magical tool that you can plug in and be in the cloud tomorrow. I think every vendor that you bring on, we did an analysis at one company, and we did an analysis of all of the security tools that they had, and given the feature list of each tool, what is the redundancy that they had? So how many different pieces did the same thing? And then if you have 100%, if you used 100% of Palo Alto, right? Of that, you're fully utilizing that expense. But what we found is that people are using 4 features of 30 across 50 different appliances. And so once you talk about, hey, we're special, that just means somebody in your organization doesn't know how to run it, doesn't know how to use it, doesn't know how to install it and fully, make it efficient and effective. And so you end up getting 5 different tools to do 5 different things that one tool can do 4 of.
I worked for a company called, I can say it's on LinkedIn, right? Called Bechtel for 7 years.
I know Bechtel.
Engineering, procurement, and construction, one of the largest companies in the world, one of the largest in the United States. nuclear reactors. We had mega projects, billions or tens of billions of dollar projects. We thought we were special. And, we're protecting nuclear facilities. We're special. The more we focused on how special we were, the more we lost sight of what every single freaking organization loses sight of. And we called it Security 101. The basics. And so few organizations have it. And they rush out to buy, like Jason, I love how you stated yours, by the way. I was sitting here going, yeah. That everyone rushes out to buy the best product, the coolest thing, the newest. It's like, that's awesome. Do you have what's your password policy? Oh, 8+1. Cool story. I got befuddled. Do you even use MFA like everywhere? Oh, we have like an MFA solution. Okay. Well, hold on. Do you offer mobile phones? Yeah. Do you have an MDM on those phones? No. Okay. Cool story. Right. So just all these really basic things that people are not implementing. And I had to kind of draw back to that because it was such a great statement. The more special you think you are, you lose sight of, hold on, we all need the same foundations and building blocks. And quite honestly, I have to give it to the healthcare industry. I have never worked with an industry. Well, the nuclear was pretty okay. Nuclear is probably one higher above that. But I've never worked with an industry outside of literally nuclear facilities who already had pre-established emergency response processes that were phenomenal. When I run my tabletops, I'm like, oh, you have that? Oh, okay. Just the simple, your computers go down, at the nursing stations. And then the NICU goes, I like talking about the NICU because it's just such an important thing to me. Kids born healthy. And it's just like, yeah, we have pad and pen and we have this and we have that and we have this and we have that. And then we go, what about the RXs? Oh, we have these. Their procedures are like, it's going back, talking about something this thick. And so I think that's actually a major positive. And as long as we, the royal we, I'm not part of you, but I am now, right? I'm part of the overall team. As long as we evolve those procedures with the technology, then great. My last tabletop, I said, hey, your EDR program goes, or hold on, your electronic medical EMR, goes down. What are you going to do? And they're like, actually, so what we have, and they explained they had these crash carts that actually pull from the database every like 2 hours or something like that. And so they have an offline database and that these are on different power circuits. And I'm like, what? Are you serious? I would love that, to hear that more organizations had that kind of thing. But I think that using that mentality of we're special in that regard is awesome because duh. Because duh.
Just a quick point to follow that up and round it out. In 2015, when the Ukraine power grid was attacked, lots went into that. Ultimately, they ran manually for about 6 months after that. Full manual operations for 6 months. The unique thing about, I don't know if it's the unique thing about them specifically, but they didn't have newer technology. They didn't have the reliance on technology that, say, we have in North America. In running the grid. In North America, you probably could not run manually. And so that's my only fear is when we talk today about reliance on the technology or what we would do without the technology, do we truly understand how integrated it is into every single step of every single day?
All right.
Communications.
So we are right at time. I'm going to make a few notes here. There's an event survey that's going across your ticker right now. It's tinyurl.com, SANS Healthcare Forum. If everyone could please fill that out. But just go around the room, and I'm going to give everyone just a little bit of time to think about this. Like everyone's spoken today, but if you could summarize in two words, your takeaway that you would like to get everyone to think about as your takeaways. So I'm going to start, just give everyone my takeaways from security strategy. It's going to be culture and people to start off for my the 2-word takeaways for mine. I'm going to do whoever's ready for your 2 words. I'll take a volunteer for your 2-word takeaways. Ryan, go.
We all wanted to jump in. Security 101.
Security 101, the basics. Love it. Who's
Ransomware hit
next?
because of that.
Yeah, on the same lines, start small. Just start is the biggest
Love
thing.
it. Start small. All right, Jason.
The concept of the BISO. Do you have one? And do you have one that's shadow that you should be getting to know in your organization?
All right, a lot more in 2 words, but I love it.
I'm not a brief person.
Awesome. All right, Stephen Hart, wherever you're at, take it away, my friend.